And we're going to finish up the Farmer Rapid Fire out in Eastern Canada. We're talking to Marc Maisonneuve. He is in the Ottawa area. He's a territory manager, area agronomist in Eastern Canada. Hey, Marc, how's it going?
Very good, Shaun. Good to hear from you again.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Okay, so now you've been out talking to retails, talking to customers. We're in that sort of that getting closer to that zone here of where the weather has definitely turned much nicer, and now we're just waiting for that soil to be fit so we can get going, right?
That's exactly it. I mean, there has been a little bit of scratching around. Obviously, some of the retailers have been busy moving some fertilizer, some spreaders, and getting some of that on spring. And some of the wheat, but also some spring cereal planting has been going on, and some were timing it with a couple of showers and rains. But generally speaking, there's been a lot of ground, especially some of the lighter soils that has been ready for the last week or so. And so there's a little bit more to go. There's obviously less of those types of acres compared to where I'm from in Alberta, northern Alberta, in the Peace Country, where they're gearing up for some big time wheat planting here, if not tomorrow, for sure by the weekend, and that's on the early side too. So I think everybody's enjoying that spring anticipation, east or west, and probably more excited about that at the same time, some concern around soil moisture. I think we're okay to get going, of course, but you look at some of the forecasts in Western Canada and even Eastern Canada, we're gonna, hit some dry spells. But of course, everybody will take a drier spell to get the crop in and get some nice warm rains to warm it up if the soil's not fit or not ready. And
Yeah.
I'm sure by next weekend, the 2021st, the pedals start coming down and full bore, for that last week of April.
Yeah, for the growers that are thinking about, when they're making a decision on in Eastern Canada when to hit the field to put some corn in the ground, and we talk about the soil being fit, but sometimes we don't get to that next stage of what does that really, really mean? And it may have a little bit of a different definition depending on where you are in your soil type and things like that. But for the most part, in generalities, how do you define the soil being fit?
Yeah, there's going to be there's a lot of no-till for one thing. So you definitely want under that crust that things are drying up, not too sticky and gummy. And we do have a variety of soils from sandy soils, but into some really heavy clays too. And so that that seed can be placed properly and have good surroundings, access to fertility and for root establishment. So that's one piece, and the temperature obviously is good, in that 7 to 8 degree plus range. Obviously lower than that for spring cereals, but when we're starting to look at corn, and quite frankly, the conversation has changed a lot where the soybean maybe should go in ahead of corn. Soybeans a little more rugged when it comes to being able to fend off some variable soil types, textures, and temperatures, and usually can get off to a pretty decent start when at the same time the corn can be a little bit more finicky. We don't want to mess around too much with temperatures and some tough soil conditions or some tight soil conditions, and especially in clay when it comes to corn. We want to make sure that it's got sort of its best start. So at times you may also want to consider, planting some beans first ahead of corn. But of course, everything seems to fare better whether you're east or west to getting your crop in as early as possible,
Yeah.
and buying yourself that combine time at the end of the season.
Now, you mentioned that you're visiting relatives who farm in the Peace region of Alberta. That is an entirely different landscape than you're used to dealing with in Eastern Ontario. It's night and day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different, it's a different formula. Obviously, we've got some very um, intensive farming on acres in Eastern Canada, but especially because we're maybe balancing that with some crop rotation, and with obviously the dairy industry being so strong, and especially in Eastern Ontario, they've got some concentrated agriculture taking place on some very high value land. Comparatively, to some really good soils, and even if they're not the best soils, we know farmers to be intelligent, and get to know what they're working with, and that's where we're seeing, working with their crop consultants or retail crop consultants or their independent crop consultants, and the education level has moved all the way up. I would say that we're getting our better average yields than we ever have, even in variable soils and various variable levels of intensity, as far as fertility goes, as well. So, either way, it's, yeah. Sometimes it's as far as the eye can see, and other times it's you can see maybe a couple hundred acres as far as distance goes, and a little bit more a mix of rural and urban sprawl in eastern Canada, whereas we've got what seems like an unlimited amount of acreage in Western Canada. A lot of similarities, some differences, but in some cases, a lot of similarities as to what the grower, customer, and the retailer is dealing with in these changing times.
Honestly, Mark, more similarities than sometimes people acknowledge. People tend to focus on the differences in the geographies across the country, and crop types and farm sizes and those kinds of things. But I feel super fortunate, as like your experience has been. You get to see agriculture in different parts of the country, and I wish more people had that experience. If you're farming in Alberta, canola, wheat, pulse crops, you take the opportunity to go check out a corn bean farm in Ontario, and or make it out to the Maritimes and see potato production and things happening there, and other things. Like, those are great experiences, and it's such a diverse country from an agriculture perspective, and there is way more in common than sometimes people make it out to be. It's pretty cool
Yeah,
stuff.
that is true, and in Ontario, we do see some winter canola.
Yeah,
In on the prairies, we're seeing some corn acres too. So there are things that we haven't seen as much. You look back even 10 years ago, so
we're
it's pretty cool
converging
to
on each
see.
other. We're converging on each other. Well, Mark, hey, thanks so much for joining us here today on the Farmer Rapid Fire.
Much appreciated, and I really want to wish everybody a really great, safe spring. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well put. Of course, the Farmer Rapid Fire is brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. Make sure you go to pioneer.com/Canada to find out more. And of course, to all of our American listeners, just go to pioneer.com. Okay. If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. And we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.